Welcome to another Founder Wisdom Pod. Today we have Ashish Porwal with us. He is founder at Hreem Legal, Advocates and Solicitors. This podcast brought to you by podpire.com. If you want to start, scale, or be invited to a podcast, get great guests, get into interviews and get insights with these guests, also get leads, also get clients, grow your community, grow subscribers, you start a podcast or scale one for that, or be invited to one, podpire.com. If you want to have more information. Ashish, welcome to the pod. Can you tell us a bit more about yourself and about what you do?
Thank you, Charles. Thank you for inviting me and giving me this opportunity to be on this podcast. Really appreciate that. So basically, a brief introduction. I run a corporate law firm here in India. It's called Hreem Legal. And as a corporate lawyer, I only focus on corporate and transactional work. So that is pretty much summary of what we do. I started this firm in 2014, February. It's been a couple of years since then. And yeah, that's pretty much what essentially we do. As a lawyer, I started my career in 2006 as a banking and derivatives lawyer. Then I decided to, have a shift in my practice area, became a general corporate lawyer. And since then, I've been doing same kind of work. So that is what I essentially do. Other than being, full-time practicing lawyer, I also enjoy doing some bit of academics. So I do, take certain classes for management students, law students who basically need some support in terms of their academics. But that's not a full-time thing. That's only, I'm passionate about teaching. So I make sure that whenever the opportunity comes, I sort of make myself available for that.
Right. And what are you specialized in as a lawyer?
So basically, in terms of specialization, while we do not focus on a specific sector, being full-fledged lawyer, typically we practice in terms of all the upcoming startup tech sectors. Plus, we also do equal amount of work for the traditional sectors, which are really not tech related. So let's say the traditional ones would mean infrastructure, power, real estate, and stuff like that. For technology sector, we have clients across the board. So people doing IT, general stuff, people doing health tech, food tech, e-commerce. So that is basically split of the kind of work we do. And so that is in terms of clientele. In terms of kind of work we do, we sort of help the clients right from their incorporation till their entire life cycle. So we have been fortunate to work with a couple of clients who started their venture with us while they were incorporating. They did multiple rounds of fundraise, Series A, Series B. They were eventually bought out by another, other entity, another competitor. So in a way, we were fortunate enough to see the entire life cycle of a particular client. But those instances have been rare. We do have clients who are still working with us. So as they are growing, we are growing, and vice versa.
What have you seen changing in the landscape in the last couple of years that could affect the startups legal-wise in India?
See, I think one drastic change has been that for last 2-3 years, what we are constantly seeing that as a very regular thing is that a lot of startups have started approaching lawyers. So initially, couple of years back, at least when I started out, the awareness of having a lawyer on your side was not really there. So till the time a venture reached a particular stage, they sort of did most of it on their own. So founders used to refer to different sources, look up on the net, and that's how they were sort of managing the legal aspects as well. But for last 2-3 years, what we are seeing is that a lot of founders have become very aware. They understand the importance of having a lawyer on their side. And that is one clear trend that we are seeing from a founder's perspective. From investors' perspective or community perspective, a lot of seriousness has come in terms of compliances, especially because if you're starting out, if there is no seriousness in terms of compliance, it could sort of pan out into a bigger trouble when you're looking to engage further, expand your business, looking out for investors. And that's where sometimes we have seen deals fall through because company were not really legally compliant. Their house was not in order. So now a lot of times we see that people are aware and they sort of understand to have seriousness with respect to legal function as well. So these are two clear trends that we have seen in the past. Third obvious trend is that initially people used to focus on meeting the lawyer physically, right? So let's say if I was based out of Delhi NCR, most of my clients were concentrated around this area who were, comfortable visiting our office. But in last 2, 3 years, especially after the COVID waves, people sort of developed the habit of doing things over, video calls and emails. So that has made, life of everyone very, very easy. And we have been able to expand our horizon. So despite being sitting in Delhi NCR, we have clients across India. So, tier one cities, tier two cities, and even offshore clients, we are able to serve with absolute ease. So that has been pretty easy.
Usually the pricing for lawyers is not really attractive. It's like $300 an hour, like in Canada and US. How are you adapting your pricing packages to these startups? Is it by smaller payments? Is it by defining the precise goals? Is it by estimating how much time it will take? How are you proposing something that's more win-win for these startups?
Yes. So I think the clients who are pretty early, who approach us, to be onboarded, who are pretty young in terms of their life cycle, for them, they always prefer some kind of fixed fee arrangements. So they would not want to engage us on an hourly basis or, on a fixed monthly basis. They would sort of like to have a fixed fee engagement for every assignment. And once, that comfort is there, the clients are able to see the value add and they understand and appreciate. That's when, sorry, in most of the cases, we sort of migrate to an hourly rate basis. But yes, that one thing is very, very clear, that the kind of, billing rate that we can charge or command over traditional clients who are older ventures can't be similar to what we can charge to a startup. So startup rates are pretty, heavily discounted and heavily negotiated. So what we believe is discounted rate, a client would want further discount on that. But I think because we work in that ecosystem, we understand the constraints of a startup. So we are absolutely happy to partner with them with the idea that, once they will grow, we will definitely get more occasions to bring our billing on par.
Right. Do you feel that I could use ChatGPT to write my terms and conditions instead of going to a lawyer? Can I just copy my ideal version of my company, aka my strongest competitors' terms and conditions, and replace it with my name and tell GPT to modify a couple of things here and there? Could I just do that as a start instead of paying $1,500 to a lawyer?
See, I think the answer is yes and no. Yes, because yes, you can always avail all the resources online, including ChatGPT. And the way I have seen things happening, you will get, an output which will sort of be helpful to the extent of 70 to 80%. But that 10 or 20% is what a lawyer will add a value to what you do. But a lot of times it's not a very, very bad idea for founders to use or take some external help. But it is always good to engage a lawyer to understand what are the specifics. So for general matters, online resources are absolutely fine and they are pretty accurate. But for something which is very, very specific on a legal point, which might have an exposure in the future, or wherever you need to negotiate and threadbare discuss with the other side or with their lawyers, that's when you can't replace a physical lawyer with a bot or a GPT kind of structure or any kind of AI tool.
If I get sued, maybe I could come up with a prompt and feed it the right data so that it could defend me better than a junior lawyer, could I? Because I haven't been brought to court a lot in the last 7 to 10 years of my entrepreneurial career, fortunately, because I hit scale, and when you hit scale and have a lot of clients, it means that you'll get a couple of loonies that will try to sue you and so forth. Happened once in my case, and I outreach to a legal tech SaaS in Quebec, and I felt I didn't get a lot of value. It was more mental reassurance than like physical solid defense. They would kind of rent me a junior lawyer part-time, so it was really weak, you know. And that I was left in charge of my own defense, and yeah, the results were kind of mitigated. They weren't super good. Where I'm getting at with this, you know, is that these legal tech startups, well, yeah, they literally like take a bunch of lawyers, they split their time, and then they give a better price to the consumer. Me, what I would better picture with that, obviously, a chat GPT cannot legally represent you in court, but if you feed it the right data, the right jurisprudence, everything that it needs to know to properly defend you, I think it can be pretty decent. There's a bunch of apps now that you can just upload a PDF in there. It can scrape through the whole thing. And if it's like small claims that we call them in Quebec, it's you're in charge of defending yourself, literally. So the question is, do you think that I could have got better outcomes back in these days? ChatGPT didn't exist or wasn't like fully deployed. And what does that mean for lawyers? You know, like because consumers, they're not like on trend with this technology. And I feel it's like more mental comforting to have a human and like it lowers your stress level. But for folks like me that have this experience and are somewhat confident, could we use a robot to actually defend ourselves? And could it even have a greater outcome than a junior lawyer?
So basically, in kind of litigating matters, when you require some kind of representation, I think a combination of technology plus a fairly experienced lawyer is something what any client would require, because uh, tools, artificial intelligence tools like GPT or any other similar apps, what they will essentially do is that they will do the research part easy, right? So they will make you, instead of a physical lawyer looking at case laws for last 50 years, and there's a possibility of someone missing something out, with technology that possibility of something not being looked at, a particular case law, a particular judicial precedent not being looked into, is minimized. So if those tools are phenomenal to prepare your case, right? But in order to present your case, I think that is an art, that's not a science. The way you sort of it's a storytelling. You have to put your facts, your case in a manner where you're able to convince the judge. It's like you have to narrate in a manner, captivate your audience, which in this case is the jury or the judge sitting across the bench. So that's what we essentially need. So physical lawyer presence is absolutely necessary. Technology along with that presence, if we are using the right tools in the right manner, it's a deadly combination. So in a way, to answer a question, technology might be able to replace junior lawyers, rather inefficient junior lawyers, but serious or senior experienced lawyers are there to stay, because if they're able, and in fact senior lawyers, experienced lawyers who are able to adopt to technology, they will definitely flourish, because for them it's become very very efficient, right? Instead of spending 5 hours in research, I may just use a AI tool, get every output that I need in, let's say, 40-50 minutes or even 30 minutes, and I can maximize the output for myself, increase my productivity, and at the same time have probably some leisure time for myself, because as a lawyer we are always deprived of time. So that might either help us to take more work if we want to utilize in that manner, or it will free up some time for us.
Right. So you advise startups on private equity, VC, venture capital, joint ventures, M&A.
Yes.
Let's start with venture cap. Like, what advice do you have for founders that are raising funds, and how to have them secure a good deal with the VC and a deal that won't put in jeopardy their own companies?
See, I think probably this may not be a very, very generalized statement, but one thing which I have, which at least I have seen a lot happening, is that sometimes founders show a lot of desperation to VCs to raise money. And that's when, they sort of, I would not say they get a bad deal, but they have to give away a lot in terms of, in a way, it's not like an equal marriage. So when we talk about a VC putting money into a founder's venture, in a way, founder should be able to, stay on similar terms, if not equal terms, but at least palatable terms, at least on par. which essentially means that as a founder, you should not be required to give away everything, right? Because it's a marriage where VC is giving the money, you are bringing the brain and your idea to work upon. You are the physical person who will gonna run the idea with that money. So if the moment you sort of treat VCs like gods, that they are the ones, whatever they are saying is absolutely right, whatever they say I have to agree, otherwise they'll pull the plug. So if we go with that thought process, that mindset, a founder will get exploited. So my advice to direct answer to a question is that once you are approaching a VC, you should have very clear cut idea as to what you want with that deal. So you should have a some kind of pointers available with you, what is must have for you, what is good to have, and what you can give away easily. So those things are very, very important. And especially and a lot of times when we as lawyers sort of look at a document, we only look for bad outcome situations, days where there's a dispute and you need to look at the document. A lot of times client believe that that will never happen, so why are we putting our thought to it? I think that approach needs to be changed a bit, because a document is required to be done only for those edge case bad situations. So therefore founders need to be very, very clear about those things.
Right. What M&A, what merger and acquisition have you participated in lately, and what have been some exciting M&A that we've seen in Asia that caught your attention? What would be the insights with those?
See, I think in the Indian context, a lot of activity has happened over last couple of months. Transactions involving some of the ed tech companies, transaction involving some of the biggest power companies in India have been pretty exciting. There's a lot of action happening in banking sector. So those are the big ticket things. But interestingly, a lot of transactions, M&A transactions, are happening under the radar. It's a difficult market. A lot of good startups have not been able to raise their next round of funding, as a result of which a lot of M&A activity is happening at startup level. Because these companies are not listed company, they are not publicized, the deals are equally complicated, but a lot of stuff is happening, not in public domain. But that is where sort of we find this is a very, very interesting space and time to be in. In fact, in last 3 months, we have been able to close 5, acquisition transactions, out of which 3 were, sort of okay or happy kind of transaction, and 2 transactions are actually distress sales. Now, in case of distress M&A transactions, it's more like, it's not really a pure play commercial or a legal transaction, but a lot of personal and ego stuff also gets into picture, right? A founder who is not willing to do a particular transaction, but his VCs or investors or other stakeholders are pushing a venture to get acquired by someone else, so that someone does not need to write off their funding. So that is sort of interestingly happening in the Indian context a lot. While we are seeing equal amount of action in terms of fundraise, although fundraise action has sort of become slightly selective, because initially till let's say 6 months back, it was pretty simple, not simple, but yeah, it was easy to raise funds, because everyone was willing to put in money in every kind of venture. Now investors have become very, very smart. They have burned their fingers in couple of transactions. So instead of growth, the focus has shifted to profitability, scalability, and therefore the quantity of fundraise has reduced, but quality has significantly improved. The timelines to close a deal, those have also increased, but the transactions which are happening right now are very, very serious in nature. And there's some kind of filtering automatically, right? Instead of you seeing 100 fundraise transactions happening, out of which eventually only 10 companies will succeed, now you might only see only 30 transactions, but the possibility of entire 30 or 25 companies succeeding is pretty high. And I think which is why quality has taken precedence over quantity now, and which is as lawyers being in that ecosystem, we really appreciate that.
Right. And we've seen huge startups pop out of India. So that's great case studies. For example, Flipkart.
Yes.
What do you have to say on how they manage their the legal aspect of their companies, and did they do a good job? Did they got into problems because they didn't put enough resources and time into these things? Any comments or insights on these?
See, I think I'm not aware about how good or bad their legal situation was in early days. I'm sure with right kind of founder having right kind of vision, I'm sure they would absolutely would have taken sound legal advice. But once any of these ventures became slightly more prominent, that's when at least I am aware that most of them had very very solid sort of legal compliance focus, because just not relying upon the external resources, all the big startups, including the unicorns that we have in India, they all had good quality in-house legal team. So legal function initially was not given prominence, but once they came into limelight, or even before that, all these startups, all the good big startups, they had dedicated in-house legal team to manage their day-to-day legal stuff. Plus they were absolutely getting good sound legal advice from external law firms as well. So yeah, to answer your question, startups in India are pretty okay in terms of legal compliance. They do consult lawyers in-house, external, and they manage their legal function pretty well.
Your students, you're seeing them enter a new market with chat GPT and all of that. What recommendations do you have for them to enter this market as soon as possible and enter it in good shape, adapt to the current times, and thrive in their profession?
So I think my only advice is, and I'm slightly and this is where I differ from other probably people who might want to give advice. My advice is that a lot of times, you know, people would say that you need to spend at least 5 years or 6 years or 10 years with a lawyer in their chamber, get that kind of learning, and only then step into the market. I think now the situation has sort of changed. Probably 1 or 2 years of good training with a lawyer or a in a firm will make you smart enough to be able to go independent, start your independent career as a corporate lawyer, as a litigating lawyer, as a taxation lawyer. And there is no sort of dearth of resources. So initially, when all these online tools were not there, it was slightly difficult for lawyers to at least find basic answers, because we also need to refer some of the newer aspects. We also need to refer to multiple resources. But with technology being to our rescue, it has become slightly more easier to be able to access all kind of resources and sort of get right kind of learning and to be able to advise your clients. So to law students, always welcome. Just have good training, probably for 12 to 18 months, and you will be right there in the market.
Where can people find out more about you, Ashish?
See, I think while we do have a static kind of, it's not a very, very elaborate website. The website is www.hreemlegal.com. But again, that is where I slightly differ. Under Indian laws, lawyers are not allowed to do any kind of marketing and solicitation of work. So which is why, even though we have a website, technically that website should not give out too much information. So, whatever information, limited information is available either on my LinkedIn page or sort of my website. That's all that we can offer in public domain. And which is why, interestingly, I have been lucky in that sense that being a traditional lawyer, old school lawyer, that I don't go out and market, do a lot of, sort of practice development activities. It's all thanks to word of mouth where we get our work from. So instead of doing any kind of marketing, we believe that our clients are best sort of marketeers for us, and they are the best person to speak about us.
Thank you so much, Ashish. That was Ashish Porwal. I am Charles Cormier, the host of Founder Wisdom Podcast. If you want to start, scale, or be invited to a podcast, that is podpire.com.